Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games and Battle Report number 2 between the Scions of the Flame and the Khainite Shadowstalkers. The last time these warbands met, the Scions held on to the objectives for the win, but now the Shroud Queen has followed them down into the Catacombs and is out for revenge. So let's get stuck in to Battle Report number 2. The Shroud Queen and the Blazing Lord have mustered their warbands, and in the shield for the Khainite Shadowstalkers, we've got the Shroud Queen and 2 Shroud Blades with umbral spears. In the hammer, they've got a Shroud Blade with cursed swords, Dark Flame Warlock with Doomfire Ring, and Dark Flame Warlock with repeater crossbows. And the dagger is led by our Slaughter Shade with Shadow Whip, backed up by a Shroud Blade with umbral spear and a Shroud Blade with cursed swords. For the Scion shield, we've got the Blazing Lord and the Initiate with Morningstar and the Inferno Priest. In the hammer, we've got the Brazen Champion and the Immolator. And for the dagger, we've got the Fireborn with Sunblade Chris, and the Initiate with Brazier Weapon and Flameburst Pot. Both warbands roll off for priority, and it's a big win there early on for the Scions with a 6, so the priority goes to the Scions. The battlefield for today's battle is the Infernal Forge Floor, and for the deployment card, they've gone for the Dispute. And then we've got the Victory, the Cursed Relics, and then finally the twist is Delayed Allies. The Scions won the priority. They chose to go for the blue deployment zone and shield, and the dagger will enter as reserves, and because of the twist, they'll enter on round 4. And the Infernal Forge floor is set up with the bridges, starting with the wooden bridges, then the metal bridges, and then both warbands take turns to place 6 doors onto the battlefield, choosing alternatively to put an open or a closed door in place. And this is some tactics early on here as warbands know where the deployment areas are going to be and decide where to use the doors effectively. Now the warbands take turns to place their unique dungeon features, and there's 4 here, starting with the sewer entrance, the weapon stash, the cursed caskets, and finally the collapsed doorway. The sewer is going to act as an entrance tunnel, so we'll see that coming into effect in round 4, while the weapon stash will give our fighters extra attack characteristics. The cursed caskets is going to inflict some damage if they get too close. And then finally the collapsed doorway is going to act as both an obstacle and some dangerous terrain, holding up our fighters as they move around the battlefield. With our battlefield set up and our fighters in their deployment zones ready for battle, let's take a look at today's victory card. And today's victory card is the Cursed Relics. Treasured items reside in this place, but the cost of bearing them is great. Place 1 treasure token at the centre of the battlefield. Then, starting with the player who won the priority roll, players place 1 treasure token each. Each treasure token can be placed anywhere on the battlefield, more than 9 inches from any other treasure tokens, and more than 3 inches from the battlefield edge. If a fighter is carrying treasure at the end of their activation, allocate D6 damage points to them. The battle ends after 5 battle rounds. When the battle ends, the player who has the most fighters carrying treasure wins the battle. And the first treasure token is placed in the centre of the battlefield. The Scions choose to place theirs close to their deployment points, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers also do the same near their deployment point by the closed door. And now our fighters move in within 3 inches of their deployment points, and the Scions go first, and this is them moving in both their hammer and the shield, and the daggers will join later on in the battle, and because of the twist, they're going to join us at battle round 4. With all the fighters on the battlefield, it's time for round 1, and the Scions go first, rolling for initiative, and they roll a double and 4 singles. And now it's time for the Khainite Shadowstalkers to roll, and let's see what they get. They get 2 doubles and 2 singles. So with the initiative in the hands of the Scions, they choose to use their wild dice to make one of their singles a double, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers choose to keep their wild dice for the next round. And with the initiative, the Scions go first, and the Immolator eyes up the bridge and chooses to use a double ability to gain that extra 1 to each movement, and now he can cross that bridge without having to worry about it getting weakened. So it's 1 move action to approach the bridge, and 1 move action to cross it, and he's safely across with no problems. And that's the end of his activation. And for the Khainite Shadowstalkers, the Shroud Blade's going first, eyeing up that jump, and although it's 5 inches, they could clear it quite easily. They choose to use their double ability, which is a Shadow Leap, and this is going to get them across that pit without having to roll for damage once they reach the other side. And with their first move action, they get cleanly across, landing on the other side, and then now they're going to use their second move action to get around in a nice position to welcome that Immolator as he advances, but also keep him within 1 inch of that arm stash to benefit from the +1 that they can get to their attack's characteristic. And that ends the activation for our Shroud Blade with Umbral Spear, and now the Scion's Brazen Champion chooses to move, and he looks at following his Immolator to the metal bridge or chooses to go around the wooden section. Either way, he's going to look to increase that move characteristic and adds 1 with his double ability. That extra 1 to his move characteristic is going to get him across the bridge without having to worry about rolling, and as that bridge is already weakened, he doesn't want to take the risk there, and for his second action chooses to move and waits just behind that collapsed doorway. And that ends his activation, and now it's back to the Khainite Shadowstalkers who choose to move across the bridge, and this is our Dark Flame Warlock with Doomfire Ring, getting into a nice position there with 2 move actions into the doorway, and that's going to end his activation. Lots of movement here in round 1, and now the Scions of the Flame advance towards the closed door, and the first one to go is the Inferno Priest, and she positions herself there waiting to try and unlock that door in her next turn, and then that's the end of her activation. And then across again to our second Dark Flame Warlock, this time with repeater crossbows, who moves nicely up to the bridge and then uses their 5 move action to cleanly get across the bridge and end their activation without having to worry about weakening that bridge. Next is our Blazing Lord, and he uses 2 move actions to get as close as he can to that closed door, and he's going to end his activation there, waiting to unlock it in the next round. And then moving over to our Khainite Shadowstalkers, and now it's the turn of our Shroud Blade, who moves up to the closed door just to protect that treasure token there, but chooses not to pick it up, and ends her activation on guard with the treasure. Now zipping across again, we've got our Initiate, and he's looking to jump across that pit in the next round, so with 1 move action he chooses to end his activation, and our Shroud Queen moves up to the pit and ends her activation, waiting to see what the enemy's going to do in the next turn. Our final Shroud Blade moves up to the bridge in 1 move action, and then uses a second move action to move across, and then doesn't have to roll to see if that bridge collapsed. And ends her activation there. That's all our fighters activated, so let's gather those activation tokens and take a quick overview of round 1. So with round 1 complete, we didn't see an awful lot there, just with the Scions in the bottom left corner, just moving into position onto those doors, and also with the Initiate there waiting to jump across the pit and get onto the action, supporting the Blazing Lord, who's going to come in from the top, eyeing up that treasure. So they're going to kind of meet there and then set up a defensive wall against the oncoming Khainite Shadowstalkers, and then they know that following that in rounds, they've got their Blazing Lord and the Inferno Priest who can come across that bridge and back them up if need be. The Khainite Shadowstalkers use their fast moves there to fly, and their fly ability to get across and get into a great position, eyeing up the treasure well away from the cursed casket that we can see here, but also within 1 inch of that arm stash that's going to give +1 to attacks characteristics of any oncoming fighters that come in on the next round. And this one here, the Shroud Blade decided to stay and protect that treasure token, but she does have a locked door here, So in the round 4 of the twist, when the new players come in, she knows that they're going to have to come in and then use up a round to get through that door. So they're going to have to come in through here or here if they want to make an attack. And so she's feeling pretty confident and in a good position. But that Shroud Blade is just hanging back, waiting to see if she needs to protect against these two here, or if need be, she can come in and move up and into the fight if she needs to. We've got another fighter here who came across the bridge and is in a good position, well away from that cursed casket there, but in a position to move in onto the treasure, and with 2 more Khainite Shadowstalkers using this wall here and here as protection, they can come in through the door. They've also got a nice clean line of attack, and they're going to be looking to fight against this guy here who's going to move into their line of fire, and he's got to be careful there. So that's some good positioning by the Khainite Shadowstalkers. Let's not forget the Immolator, who's here as well, and he's got a good eye on that. So we're getting a nice wall of attacks coming in from 3 angles here from the Scions, but they're being matched with the oncoming defensive positions being set up by the Khainite Shadowstalkers. So let's move into round 2 and see where the action takes us. Now we're on to round 2, and after all that manoeuvring, let's hope for some action now as the Scions roll there for initiative, and they get a double, another double, and a third double. And now it's the time for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. They get 1 double and 4 singles. So the initiative going straight to the Khainite Shadowstalkers, who choose to make a 5 single into a 5 double, and our Scions of the Flame choose to make a triple out of their double. Okay, and with the initiative, the Khainite Shadowstalkers are going to go first in round 2, and our Dark Flame Warlock with repeater crossbows moves up to the sewer entrance, taking control of that high ground, and she's got her eye on the Immolator, who's advancing towards the treasure token. Just measuring up there to see if she's in range, and then she rolls her attack dice. She gets 4 attacks, and with 3 4s and a 5, not great against the Immolator, who's got that extra toughness against her strength, so just 1 damage to him, and that's going to end her activation for round 2. The Scions choose to activate their Brazen Champion, who climbs over that collapsed doorway. That dangerous terrain means he has to roll, and he gets away with it there with the 3, so no damage to him for that, and then he uses his second move action to advance on the treasure, making sure to stay 1 inch away from the cursed caskets and in reach of that treasure should he wish to pick it up in a later turn, and that's going to end the activation for our Brazen Champion. Now our Warlock with Doomfire Ring has got a clear view of the Brazen Champion there and chooses to hold his position and take fire, and he rolls 2 dice and with no effect there, so he chooses to roll again for his second action, and he gets a critical hit now on the Brazen Champion, but that's just only going to give 4 wounds, and that doesn't trouble him there with his high wound count, and that's going to end the activation for our Dark Flame Warlock, and he's going to stand guard on the door. Next up is the initiative for the Scions of the Flame, and he's looking to jump across that pit, but he needs to have that extra movement there, so he's going to use a double on the Universal Rush ability. That's going to give him an extra 1 to his movement, and he can make a nice clear jump across the pit now, and he's going to have to roll for damage there. And does he get any damage? No, he gets away with it, rolling a 1, so he's all good and continues with his next action. And he's just measuring up there, takes a little look, sees who he can get close to, and he's looking to move towards the treasure token and hopefully get between that Dark Flame Warlock and the Immolator, but he doesn't quite make it there, and so that's him done for his activation. And now our Shroud Blade moves up to the doorway, and she's going to go straight in with an ability and uses a double Cursed Darts, and these Cursed Darts are going to start to pick away at our Brazen Champion there. So she measures just to check that that 9-inch range is good, and she's well within that range. Rolls 2 dice and gets 2 hits there. So both Cursed Darts pierce him, and he takes 4 damage in total, 2 for each of the Cursed Darts. With the move action remaining, the Shroud Blade decides to stay there. She's happy she's chipped away a little bit of the Brazen Champion. And now it's the turn of the Scions. And they've got to try and open this door and get round to that treasure token and into the fight. And so they're going to use one of their abilities here, a double called Breach Door. And this is going to help them open that door. And the Blazing Lord is taking charge. And he just only needs 1 point here. And he gets that with the 3. And with his large strength there of 5, he can easily open that door and is going to move through and protect that treasure. He just weighs up his options and decides to wait next to the treasure and on the edge of the bridge. And he's going to be looking to guard any fighters coming in perhaps on round 4, or can get in there, pick the treasure up and get in on the action in the centre of the battlefield. And the next fighter to activate is the Shroud Blade with Umbral Spear, and just checking there the range between them and the Brazen Champion, and straight in again with another double for those cursed darts and starts picking away. But with a lousy 2 and another 2, those cursed darts fly past the Brazen Champion, bounce off the wall and don't do any damage that turn. And now she uses a move action to come around and get within 2 inches there of the Initiate, and that's going to allow her to take her next action. And so she attacks there, and with her 3 attacks, let's see if they hit. With a 4 and 5, they get through, and that's going to deal 2 damage with 2 hits to the Initiate, and that's going to end the activation for our Shroud Blade. The Immolator spots a gap there between the Brazen Champion and the Initiate and measures his 4 movement and then checks the range just because he's eyeing up that triple ability that he has, and he gets within range of 2 of the Khainite Shadowstalkers there. And yep, just another double check just to make sure, and he's well within range to use his triple, and this is the Inferno ability. And then he rolls 1 dice for each fighter within that 3-inch distance. He misses with the first one, hits with the second, and that's going to be 1 point of damage going on to our Shroud Blade with Umbral Spear. And that ends the activation for the Immolator. Seeing that threat build up in the centre of the battlefield, our Shroud Queen uses a movement of 6 to take a nice leap across that pit, and she's going to have to roll to see if she took any damage there. With a roll of 1, she's fine, and uses a second move action and tucks herself behind the Shroud Blade, getting some cover, but ready to pounce if need be. And now it's the turn of the Inferno Priest for the Scions, who measures up her first movement action of 4, and her second move action, she brings her up to the bridge and doesn't want to cross it this turn, so uses her activation to end her turn in round 2. And now over there, we've got the Shroud Blade protecting that treasure and chooses not to move, ends her turn, and that's round 2 complete. So let's have a quick overview and recap of what went down in round 2. And now at the end of round 2, the Scions have decided to keep the Inferno Priest and the Blazing Lord hanging back, and they're going to be looking out for that treasure. And they're waiting just to see what's going to come in later rounds, if any reserve fighters from the dagger come in here, or even come in from this angle or down here. So they're keeping a nice strong defense there around this treasure token, and they know they've got the bridge to back off across, and they'll probably choose to do a short move, weaken that bridge hopefully, and then use another move to get across, and that's going to put the oncoming attack in a kind of bad position there if they choose to attack them from there later on in later rounds. The Scions have also got 3 fighters here, and 2 of these are very strong. The Champion and the Immolator, backed up with a ranged weapon there from the Initiate, who's looking to come around and attack this oncoming assault here. The Khainite Shadowstalkers have really taken advantage of having the extra fighter now, and they've kept this Shroud Blade back. She's going to protect the treasure token, and again that door's locked, and she's going to wait to see if any fighters come in from here and here. Our Queen is back there, hanging back, waiting to advance. She's got options to come around the rear of the Scions here. She can also come this way, use some of that cover and move in on the token. She can go right across if she has to. So she's got lots of options there to get into the battle. Then we've got a Shroud Blade protecting the Queen and in range to attack the Initiative. the Initiate. And then here, the Slaughter Shade with that range weapon, well in range of 2, and also with her eye on that treasure token there. And then finally, we've still got 2 more Khainite Shadowstalkers who have been picking away from their range weapons, and those cursed darts are really being used to take effect and chip away at the oncoming attack. So not too much action now, so let's see what round 3 brings us, and we're really going to look at the Scions now unleashing their strength and power up close and personal against the Khainite Shadowstalkers. Now with things hotting up in the centre of the battlefield, it's time for round 3, and the Scions roll first for initiative in this hero phase, and they roll a double and 4 singles. The Khainite Shadowstalkers roll, and they also get 1 double and 4 singles. And so there's a roll-off, and the roll-off went to the Scions of the Flame, who chose to use their ability dice in the next round. So they kept that to one side, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers chose to make their single into a double. The Scions have the initiative, and the Initiate goes first with his Morning Star, and he swings that around, aiming for the Dark Flame Warlock with repeater crossbows, and not enough on that first roll, so he goes again, uses both actions as attack actions, but only does a measly 3 damage to our Warlock, and that's going to end his activation there. Surely you hope for more than that. And now it's on to the Khainite Shadowstalkers, and the Dark Flame Warlock is choosing to use that movement to back off to the arm stash, which is going to give him an extra 1 to his attack characteristic, measures that range, and sure enough, he's well within range to attack the Brazen Champion. And now with 5 dice, we've got a crit and a hit, and that's a little bit extra damage there now, taking the Brazen Champion up to 12. And it's not looking good for the Brazen Champion right now. And that ends the activation for our Dark Flame Warlock with repeater crossbows. And now the Brazen Champion's turn, and he decides to move straight in over that treasure, taking the centre of the battlefield, gaining a little bit of height over the leader there, the Shroud Queen, and the Shroud Blade, but decides to attack the Shroud Blade. And so with his superior strength, he rolls, and it's not a great roll for this big guy, but he does some damage, and we see now some damage adding on, taking the Shroud Blade up to 7, and that ends the activation of the Brazen Champion, who would have hoped to have taken that fighter out with that move. And now moving back to the Khainite Shadowstalker's turn, and this Shroud Blade knows he's got to take action. He's only got 1 wound remaining, so rolls, and not a great roll now, so chooses to use the second action as an attack action. And whoa, we get 2 crits here, 2 critical hits, and that's going to do some nice damage against this Brazen Champion, and that's going to eliminate him from the game. The battle's over. He never really got into it, and that's game over for our Brazen Champion as he's removed from the battlefield. He really should have taken out that Shroud Blade there earlier on and has now paid the price. But our Shroud Blade's not finished yet, and with an ability lurking, he eyes up the initiative and decides to use those cursed darts again. So with another double ability, rolls 2 cursed darts. 1 flies past the initiate, but 1 hits them right in the back, and that's going to give a sneaky 2 damage, taking the wounds up to 4. And that finally ends the activation, and a great round for this Shroud Blade. The Scions haven't been able to use their superior strength so far, and so the Immolator decides to move in and stop these ranged attacks coming at them. Make sure he's within an inch of that stash there, the arm stash, and ends his activation, ready for the next round where he's going to take some payback against that Dark Flame Warlock. Now the second Dark Flame Warlock moves through the door and checks the range there to see if he's in range of the Initiate, and he is, and he rolls his 2 attacks, and whoa, straight in with another crit and a 4. That's 2 hits, that's a hit and a critical hit, and that's going to take this Initiate up to 12 wounds and remove him from the battle. And this is a surprise attack there, really took the Initiate out of the game, and the Dark Flame Warlock has got to be happy with that roll, with just 2 dice getting a crit and a hit, and ends his activation. The Blazing Lord is sensing some problems in the centre and regrets hanging back now behind the bridge, so sends in the Inferno Priest, and she uses up a double ability, the Universal Rush ability, so she can cross the bridge with 5 and not have to roll to weaken the bridge. And then she's going to check for range and see if she can make an attack. And can she? Is she within range? And no, she's not in range. So use a second action to move up and face that Dark Flame Warlock. And she's going to be looking to take him out and give him some of the ranged weapon action in return on the next round. And now it's the turn of the Shroud Blade, who chooses to come in with one move action through the doorway. And she's got a nice clear view at the Inferno Priest here, but out of range for the weapon. But she's looking at the range, and we do have another ability dice lurking there. And look, you guessed it, it's another double Cursed Darts, and they're really taking advantage. Whoa, it's a 6 and a 5. That's 2 hits. Both Cursed Darts hit the Inferno Priest, and that's going to give 4 damage. And with the 6, that's going to halve the movement, which won't affect the Inferno Priest because she's already activated this round. And the Shroud Blade chooses to move and use that wall to stay out of sight and out of range of any oncoming attacks in the next round. Now the Blazing Lord still chooses to hang back and ends his activation, and our Shroud Blade continues to guard that treasure by the closed door. And so now, with only the Khainite Shadowstalkers fighters left to fight, it's the turn of the Shroud Blade, who takes a move action, moves right in against the Inferno Priest, and she's going to use her close combat weapon there. Rolls, not a great roll, but let's see what damage we get from that. It's 4 wounds going on to the Inferno Priest and really piling the pressure now, and she ends her activation there. And a good round for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. So let's have a quick overview of round 3. And round 3 didn't go to plan for the Scions of the Flame there. The Blazing Lord still hanging back, but that Inferno Priest pushed up to get close to the treasure token, support the 2 fighters that were taking wounds from all angles, and then now she's in close contact there with the Shroud Queen. The Immolator has moved up and is going to try and eliminate those ranged attacks coming in and that have been covering that treasure token from the Dark Flame Warlock with repeater crossbows. And so in the next round, he's going to look to unleash there. And so not a great round, losing those 2 fighters for the Scions, but the dice weren't on their side, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers have been dominating. The Khainite Shadowstalkers really took advantage of the range weapon here and that +1 from the weapon stash, and was putting some serious damage down on the fighters coming at them. Again here, the Dark Flame Warlock and the Shroud Blade really went to town on the champion and really picked away and got some great rolls against him and took him out. And then the Shroud Blade here, with just 1 wound remaining, has really done a great job and inflicted some serious amounts of damage. And the Shroud Queen holding strong that point and ready to pick up that treasure if need be. And still, we've got the Shroud Blade hanging back with that protection of the door, that movement there that would have to be used up to get close. And she's just taking control of that treasure, waiting to see what comes in round 4. Now it's round 4, and the Scions really looking forward for their reserves to come in, and they roll for initiative, and they end up with a double 6, a double 1, and 2 singles. And the Khainite Shadowstalkers roll, and they end up getting a double 2, a double 5, and they also get 2 singles. So now they're going to have to roll off for initiative. The Scions get a 5, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers get a 3. And the Scions decide to make their double a triple, and they use their wild dice from the previous round to make another single and guarantee initiative there. And the Khainite Shadowstalkers go for a triple and a single. They both want the initiative in this round, and with another roll off, that goes to the Khainite Shadowstalkers, and this is an important time to get that initiative. And now the reserve phase comes into play, and the dagger for both warbands come in, and that initiative was so important. They both wanted it really badly because they take turns now to place their daggers, their fighters, one at a time on the battlefield, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers take control of that centre sewer entrance, which the Scions really needed to get. Now the Scions come in, looking to take advantage of their strength there and dominate in this corner and take that treasure token for themselves. But the Shroud Blade enters to protect there, trying to hold back that Fireborn, but In comes another initiate up close. So again, Shroud Blade enters, and they're all starting to pile up in the corner now. This is going to be a fierce battle for that treasure. And the third fighter for the Scions is going to come on, and you guessed it, he's in the corner too. So now we've got 3-on-3 there, and they're going to all go for that treasure in rounds 4 and 5. And in the center, that was a great move by the Khainite Shadowstalkers to steal the initiative, take the center entrance. But over here, we've got the Blazing Lord controlling that treasure token far away from the action. So it's really all going to come down to who can take the center and who can take that far corner. So let's get into round 4 action. And this is going to start with the Khainite Shadowstalkers, and our Shroud Blade rolls against the Inferno Priest. Not a great roll, so uses a second action. And this is better. We're going to get some damage now. And that takes the Inferno Priest up to 14 wounds. So she's hanging on in there, but only 1 wound left. And that's going to end the activation for the Shroud Queen. And now the Inferno Priest has got to act with only 1 wound remaining. She has to activate for the Scions. And she's going to roll to attack now with 3 dice there. 2 nice rolls. That's not bad with the 2 5s, but chooses to use a second action to attack again. Oh, not so good now. A 1, 2, and 3. This isn't great, but let's see how many wounds she's inflicted on the Shroud Queen. And 4 wounds. The Shroud Queen shrugs that off, knowing she's got 16 left, and that ends the activation for the Inferno Priest. Move down into the corner, and this is not a great position for the Khainite Shadowstalkers against these 2 Fireborns and an Initiate with strength and wounds in their favour. But they roll, and whoa, we get 2 critical hits and 2 3s, and that's going to be some serious damage going on to one of the Fireborns. And they roll again, and wow, this is some great rolling from these Khainite Shadowstalkers, and that's going to be some serious damage. 10 wounds. That takes out the Fireborn before he even has a chance to activate, and he's out of the battle quicker than he came into it, and that's a great result for this Shroud Blade. But that's not the end of this Shroud Blade's turn, and they choose to use a double ability for more of those cursed darts, which are proving to be really effective in this battle. And they turn and roll 2. 1 flies past, but 1 hits its target and gives 2 damage to our Initiate with the Brazier weapon. And what an awesome round for our Shroud Blade there with the Cursed Swords, and they end the activation. And now it's the turn of the Scions. They're going to unleash some power now, and it's the turn of the second Fireborn, who wants to get some revenge for his fallen brother, and he rolls 4 attacks. Terrible! Double 1, double 3. This is not good rolling at all. And he uses his second action. Surely this could be better. No, it's not. A 1, a 2, a 2, and a 4. Awful rolling from that Fireborn, who's really let the side down, dealing just 2 damage to the other Shroud Blade with Cursed Swords, and that ends his activation, and he holds his head in shame there. The Khainite Shadowstalkers take their turn. They sense the dice gods are in their favour today, and the Shroud Blade with Cursed Swords chooses to attack, and with the first action she rolls, and oh, it's another critical hit and a hit. The damage just keeps on coming. She rolls again, and it's 2 critical hits. This is insane. The roll in here is unbelievable, and that is another one of the Scions taken out, and they haven't even activated yet. This is a disaster, and that treasure's looking good down there in the corner for the Khainite Shadowstalkers as the Initiate is removed from battle, and that ends the activation for this Khainite Shadowstalker Shroud Blade, who's got to be feeling happy with herself and that performance. The Scions are in a terrible position now, but the Immolator wants to get some revenge and puts all his efforts onto the Dark Flame Warlock with repeated crossbows, rolls his dice, doesn't even need that extra dice that came with the arm stash there, and takes out the Dark Flame Warlock easily, and that removes the first Khainite Shadowstalker from the battlefield, and that's just the first action for the Immolator. So as the Dark Flame Warlock's removed, he looks at his options and decides to move around and see if he can get close to those other 2 there, because he's not finished yet. He's got an ability and chooses to use his triple, and as he did earlier, this goes on the Inferno, and this is going to do some damage to those fighters within 3 inches who are visible. He rolls his first dice, he misses, not good at all this. Rolls his second dice, And that's a miss too. What a waste of a triple ability. And that's going to end the activation for the Immolator, and the Scions just can't get into this battle. All the excitement, the Immolator made a bad move and got himself within the 2-inch range of that Shroud Blade, who's been really effective this battle. So they check the distance, and yep, they can attack with their spear, and they roll 3 dice. Another critical hit coming from the Khainite Shadowstalkers, and they choose to use their second action. Whoa, that was almost another critical, but we got another hit there, and that's going to put 5 points of damage on the Immolator. And is that going to end the activation for the Shroud Blade? It doesn't look like it. They're eyeing up the abilities, and yep, they've got a triple, but they're going to use that for a double instead, and going to take advantage of these cursed darts we've seen so much of. And they roll 2 against the Immolator. 1 flies past, but 1 hits its target, and that's going to put another 2 points of damage onto the Immolator, leaving him with 7 wounds remaining. And that finally ends the activation for this Shroud Blade with Umbral Spear. The Blazing Lord is watching as his warband is slowly being picked apart, and decides to pick up the treasure, and now he has to move and get in on the action, and he wants to cross that bridge, and so uses a double, and this is going to get him closer to the action with an extra move, extra point there for his move characteristic. And so this first one gets him across, and he's going to cross the bridge and then start to look at getting into combat. And so he moves over there, really feeling that mistake of waiting and hanging back, knowing he should have come up there perhaps earlier on, but relied a lot on the Fireborns who let him down big time. And he moves right up into the action, protecting his Fireborn. A good move there, making sure he's more than an inch away from that Cursed Casket, and now he's blocking any attacks that are going to come from the Dark Flame Warlock. That ends his activation, and he rolls 1 because he's carrying the treasure there, and so it's a d6 damage because it's the end of his activation, but he only takes 1 damage point. So that's the end for the Blazing Lord, and now the Khainite Shadowstalkers are measuring up, seeing what damage they can do. Slaughter Shade decides to use the whip to come out at the Inferno Priest, and with that first attack, that 1 hit is enough to deal enough damage to take this Inferno Priest out of the battle, and she never got to use any of her powers there, and she's going to be removed from the battlefield. But that doesn't end the turn for the Slaughter Shade, who's still got 1 action left, and she sets her sights on the next fighter, which is the Immolator, and he should be okay here, depending on how many hits she gets, but she's got only 1 attack against him, and so with 3 dice, it's another critical hit. This is unbelievable. These 6s are coming out thick and fast from the Khainite Shadowstalkers. That's 4 more wounds to the Immolator, and it doesn't leave him with many remaining, and ends a good round for the Slaughter Shade. The Scions of the Flame have run out of fighters to activate this round, and so the Khainite Shadowstalkers go again, and this time it's the Dark Flame Warlock with Doomfire Ring, and he takes an attack there on the Blazing Lord. Whoa, it's 2 more critical hits and a 4. This is terrible. He has another go, and it's another critical hit and a hit. This is a disaster for the Scions of the Flame, and even with those critical hits though, that Blazing Lord is lucky to only take 10 wounds, and that ends the activation for the Dark Flame Warlock. And the Khainite Shadowstalkers still have a Shroud Blade, who's measuring up, seeing how she can get in on the action there. But with 1 move action, she is going to get within an inch of that Cursed Casket. And as she ends a move action within an inch of the casket, she'll have to roll a d6, anything except a 1, and she'll take damage. And she rolls a 1, and now she's going to take 6 wounds now, so 6 damage points there. And luckily she hasn't had any wounds so far, but that really took it out of her, that Cursed Casket. But still, she's in a good position now to make an attack on the Blazing Lord, and with 1 attack action, she's going to roll against the Blazing Lord. Let's see what she gets. And that's really good with 3 hits now, 3 5s. There's even more damage going on this guy with 3 more wounds, and that's going to end the activation for the Shroud Blade. And this final Shroud Blade is going to stay there with the treasure, ends her activation. So let's have a quick overview of round 4. And round 4 didn't go to plan for the Scions whatsoever. They really needed to dominate this corner section here, and they moved in all their fighters from the dagger to get in on the action, and with those 2 Fireborns and an Initiate against 2 Shroud Blades. They really should have taken control, but the dice were just horrible for them, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers would just roll in some big hits and took them out before they could even get in on the battle. And losing those 2 fighters there, the Initiate and the Fireborn, was a complete disaster, and that just leaves this Fireborn fighting now against these 2, and he's got to move and take out this Khainite Shadowstalker here. So the odds are against him, and it's not looking good. And I think the Scions of the Flame realised they made a huge mistake putting all their eggs in one basket and looking to steal that treasure token away in round 4, and it didn't go to plan. So now the Brazen Lord has had to move across the bridge and get himself in between the attacks coming from the ranged weapon of the Warlock here, and he tried to defend his Inferno Priest, but she was taken out as well. And the Immolator has moved, had an attack, moved around the back, but has just not done any kind of damage that we've seen from him in previous battle report. And now the Khainite Shadowstalkers, really pleased with themselves. This Shroud Blade did an incredible job taking out that Fireborn and put some damage on the Initiate, which freed up some more damage coming from this Shroud Blade, taking out those 2 fighters. And still, this Shroud Blade here can stay on the treasure and is looking good now to pick that up in round 5 and hold on to that 1 treasure and take the lead. But don't forget, the Blazing Lord has still got 1. He's got 1 treasure, so it's looking at 1 each, and it's all to play for with the middle treasure token still up for grabs. But there's going to be a lot of work on the Immolator, who's the only Scion who's going to get close enough to pick it up, and the Shroud Queen is holding on a good defensive position there. So if he does come round, she's going to be really close to take him out with her ranged weapon, or move up close and take him out with her 1-inch range weapon, the up close and personal. Plus we've got the Slaughter Shade with Whip, who can rain down there, and we've got the Shroud Blade here in range, who can make an attack if they activate first. And we've still got a Dark Flame Warlock with Doomfire Ring, who's going to be raining down some more damage here. And so let's go into round 5 and see what that's got in store for the Scions, who are not having a good battle. Now it's time for round 5, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers are feeling pretty confident, but the Scions go first here, and let's see what they get in the hero phase. And they get 1 double and 4 singles. The Khainite Shadowstalkers roll, they get 1 double, 1 triple, and a single. So the initiative goes to the Scions, and they choose to use their wild dice to make a single into a double, and they've chose the 6. They got a double 6 there, smart move. And now it's time for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. They make their triple into a quad, and so with the initiative, the Scions go first, and the Immolator is looking at his options. What's he going to do here? Surely he's going to move in and attack, but with not many wounds, he's got to do something. And he uses a double, and he's gone for the rush ability. That was a surprise, but this is going to give him that extra inch of movement that gets him to the treasure token. And he chooses to pick up the treasure token. And so now, this is a quick turnaround here. The Scions have 2 treasures now. And he's going to have to roll, though, at the end of his activation in case he gets any damage because of the condition of the victory. But he's still got time to make an attack and chooses to attack the Shroud Queen. Not a great roll. This isn't good. The rolling's been terrible all game for the Scions. But still, he puts some damage there, taking the Queen up to 6 in total. And now he has to end his activation and roll for damage. And it's a d6, and he's got a terrible roll. He's got a high 5 when he didn't need it. And at 14 wounds, that was really silly. He's now out of the game. He's dropped the treasure, and surely he could have done better than that. And now that, with him being removed from the battlefield, the Scions get to choose to place that treasure 1 inch from the fallen fighter, and they choose to move it over to that cursed casket, because as soon as a player moves there, they're going to have to roll for damage. A bit of a desperate last thought there, but he's out of the game, and now the Khainite Shadowstalkers move in for the attack. And not a great roll there on the first action, so they're going to go again, and they choose to take their second action. And whoa, we've got 3 critical hits. This is insane. And 1 hit. This is not good for the Blazing Lord. and he takes 6 damage. That takes 6, another 15. It just takes him right out of the game. That completely destroyed him. And what a huge move by the Khainite Shadowstalkers there. He's going to be taken out. He drops the treasure and chooses to move it up to the cursed caskets. This is going to have no effect now at this stage. That treasure's well within reach of the Khainite Shadowstalkers. And what a round for the Shroud Queen, going out in style there. But the Scions, they don't want to give up. There's one fighter left on the battlefield. So the Fireborn takes an attack and starts moving in on these Shroud Blades. His first roll, still terrible, 1 hit, and that's not going to do a lot, so he goes again. And with this one, finally we get a critical hit and 2 hits, and that's going to take out a fighter there, and that's good night to one of the Shroud Blades who's removed from the battle, but it's far too late to start rolling those big dice now, and that's going to end the activation for the Fireborn and the Scions of the Flame. And as we draw into the end of the battle now, the Khainite Shadowstalkers want to add insult to injury and see if they can take out this Fireborn and completely leave the battlefield empty of the Scions. And so the Shroud Blade rolls, and there's a couple of hits there, but chooses to go again. And let's see what we're going to get. No, not a great roll this time. So that Fireborn's going to hang on in there. He's still going to take 2 damage, but he's going to stay in the battle, and that ends it for the Shroud Blade. And now this Shroud Blade's going to pick up the treasure and then end the activation, and then just going to roll to see if she takes any damage. D6 damage, so she does take 6, but she hasn't been hit yet, so that's fine. She keeps that treasure, and that brings us to the end of the battle with the Khainite Shadowstalkers in control of more treasure tokens than the Scions of the Flame. And what an upset for the Scions, who surely thought they had this battle sewn up in the tunnels of the catacomb, play into their strength. And with 2 Fireborns and an Initiate going up against 2 Shroud Blades earlier on, they were pretty cocky that they were going to get that treasure there. But it didn't go their way, and the Khainite Shadowstalkers have won. So let's have a recap of the 5th round and see what went wrong for the Scions and what went right for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. And that's the end of the battle, and what a great result for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. The Scions of the Flame have got 1 fighter remaining, nowhere near this treasure token, nowhere near this one, and nowhere near this one. And it was an easy win there in the final round for the Khainite Shadowstalkers. Taking out the Blazing Lord there with some huge rolls. I mean, they got some mad rolls against him there, and he didn't even get a chance to get in the fight. And it was really key to get that initiative and keep it. And our Slaughter Shade had a great position on top of there, raining down on the Immolator. The Shroud Queen was on the Immolator. This one here was on the Immolator, and they didn't stand a chance. So all up, a great result for the Khainite Shadowstalkers, unexpected. And I think that the Scions of the Flame really made a mistake of staying here with the 2 fighters, the Blazing Lord and the Inferno Priest. They really should have picked that treasure up and got in there, but they were looking to use their Fireborns in round 4 to completely dominate this section and then move forward, steal that treasure, and they were looking for an easy victory, which didn't work out for them at all. And with that overview, that brings us to the end of the battle, and a great battle for the Khainite Shadowstalkers, and the Shrouded Queen leads her warband to victory in the depths of the catacombs. As we play all the battle reports from now on, I'll be keeping a track in a Warcry league table and just keeping a record of all the battles fought, totals won and lost on the different types of battlefield. And you can see here, these are all the warbands. They're getting ready and lined up for battle against each other. So with 26 warbands in total, there's a lot of action to come. So keep tuning in for more videos like this. And I'll also keep a Warcry results matrix just so we can see how the warbands do against each other. And I'll share this each week. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. So please join in and add any thoughts or any rules I've got wrong in the comment section below. That'd be great to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more content like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.